Here's my latest prepper acquisition with this motorized bicycle. Probably get 100 miles to the gallon or more. Goes about 40 miles per hour. And in this state, if the engine is 48 cc's or less, you don't need a driver's license, motorcycle endorsement, of course, don't need any title, registration, insurance, anything like that. It's you can ride with all the same rules as bicycles. But if I'm out in the woods, one thing about taking this out in the woods, I'll have gas on hand to start fires, and I could get a lot farther with this than on foot. So I thought that was a pretty neat thing. I thought I'd show that to you guys. There you go. Well, and once I got that the bike I just showed you, I had to buy another one and put it together because I bought that one already assembled, but I wanted to assemble one, so I thought I'd make another one. Kind of a retro looking cruiser style. Not quite finished. At least I hope I don't have that many extra parts when I'm done. I'll make some videos of this build. I kind of just have everything sort of mock fit just sitting there right now, but as I tighten things down, I'll make videos so you can see how to put one of these kits on and sort of show you step by step. So this is the Huffy Neluso or something like that, and I used some brown wood stain, and all the white stitching I stained brown. So I did that, as well as I took off some of the like here at the front, I took off some of the Huffy stickers. Took off this Huffy sticker and sort of de-huffied it a little bit, but it had one of these coaster brakes, and I couldn't break the nut at first, and so that was a real pain. I'd recommend getting a bike that had the hand brakes that pinch the rim. Also, I think that front shocks would be nice too. So when you're looking for a bike, I would suggest, the standard sort of V or triangle shape you need, like in a standard adult full-frame mountain bike. But other than that, I think some front shocks and then the rear brake, like I was saying, those would be things I'd look for in a bike. But I put this sprocket on first, and if you didn't have directions in your kit, like I didn't, there's no way to know. You got these two circles of basically like tire, and you got to cut one to get it inside the spokes, and then you got 3 pieces of metal, and to get all 3 pieces of metal to line up without overlapping is a little difficult. What I thought was easiest was just to put, there's 3 bolts in each piece of metal, put the middle bolt in first and get all the pieces together, then put in all the rest of the bolts, and it'll flex. It can sort of flex it and then get this correct, and then put in these 2 bolts, and then go around and repeat that until it's all in and nice. And you kind of got to adjust it as you go so that in the end the sprocket's right in the center. But that was kind of a pain, but it went together all right. It wasn't as big of a pain as having to drop this down like a ½ inch or an inch so my motor would clear. But there's that. Installing the muffler, I got a little burr right here, so I'm going to file that down, so make sure you got nice flat surfaces. So I'll do that. Alright, I put the tiniest thin smear of some silicone on there, like as a gasket goop. Then I had 2 of these gaskets in my kit and just using one, so I guess don't let that worry you or anything. But let's put this muffler on, and you can see I've got some play. I can go a little bit each way with this. So I already mock fit everything, so I know I want mine to go all the way to the left, and I'm just going to put that on with these cut washers here and regular washer and this nut. Get them on super nice and tight. And other than that, making a bracket so that the muffler is held to the frame of the bike, that's a good idea to limit vibration. But I'm going to get this bolted on so then I can mount this engine in the bike. Alright, there used to be these little sunk-in threads for putting a water bottle. So with the chisel, I chiseled out the threads, and then used a file and just filed that down nice and smooth, so I'm not going to have any problem mounting on this. You wouldn't want to crack your case because there was a lot of pressure on a little sharp edge. But that's also why I'm going to use some of this rubber to wrap around, and so it'll be basically kind of like a motor mount. And so I'll have 2 layers, I think, of rubber on either side of my engine where it mounts to the frame. I think that'll help with vibration, and so that's one step here in mounting the engine. Alright, I was filing down a little burr that was in here, so now we should be ready to mount the bike. You saw that burr that I got off, that was up in here. Then already mock fitting everything, I knew that I wanted this to sort of flex to the left as I tightened this, or flex towards the frame. So you want to tighten these little half turn, half turn, half turn, half turn. But when you start to get tighten this one just a little bit more. You'll keep it twisting, torquing that way, the way you want it to go. I want it to go towards the bike. And then it'll be held in place and crank them down equally. But that's installing this muffler. Used a little bit of silicone. Here's my motor mount there, and I cut it out of this EPDM pond liner. It's supposed to last easily 30 years, and it's safe for fish. But at any rate, I thought that's some high quality material. 2 layers, tape this on, but I can slide it up and down. So I got one over here for the other side. So that's kind of nice. I can put it right where I need it, and I think that'll help with vibration. So let's get that engine on the bicycle. Alright, got the engine on the bike. You can see it sitting on its motor mounts. I haven't clamped it on yet. This was in the way a little bit, so I just filed it out with the chainsaw file and bent that tip a little, so now that'll drop about a ½ inch when I bolt it onto that little hole there. So then we have some clearance, and it's sitting nicely on the motor mounts. The next thing to look at is my carburetor. You want it slightly tilted towards the engine, not where the air filter would be downhill. This is tilted a little too much, so I've got to work with it. But these motor mounts will just slide up and down, so it'll be easy to do. Alright, let me screw this together. Okay, in the end I had to cut the end off and drill a hole, but now I got the clearance I need, and everything's sitting nicely on the motor mounts, sitting equally on both motor mounts. Got my carburetor looking, for the most part, horizontal, slightly tilted towards the engine. So we're ready to bolt this thing on. So there you go, mounting the engine. Alright, installing the gas can. The kit comes with a little piece of rubber, but I cut a big, nice piece of rubber that's going to fit underneath the gas can. And then there's 2 brackets, and I got 2 pieces of rubber that I'm going to put under there. So this whole gas can will be tightened on there, but this will protect against vibration from the studs being damaged in the gas can, or anything that might cause me to leak some gas. So there you go. I'm going to screw the gas can on there. Okay, installing this throttle and the throttle cable. You have sort of this big circular piece of metal that fits in there, and that's how you can tell the difference between this end and the other end. The other end of this cable had a very small metal piece at the end, and that goes into the throttle here. I'll talk about that in a sec. With this, there's a little set screw. Little set screw. And I was having some trouble drilling into this, mainly because it's circular. And so what I did is I just used this chainsaw file and just filed a little divot. And that is going to probably be perfect for this little set screw to sit right in that divot. It was holding in place pretty well before I did this, so I think it'll be just fine after. Let me get this bolt that I dropped. And here's another thing. If you're working on your porch, watch out. You can drop your parts down that porch. That's already happened to me twice. So, yeah. Learning curve. So there's that side. Then, over here, this was a little bit big for this pipe. So, I don't know if you can see, just a couple wraps of electrical tape, and then it clamped down super tight on there. So, this is the clutch side. And the other side of the clutch is just wire like this, so you can tell which end goes to which. But there's installing the equipment on the handlebars. Now I'm going to go ahead and screw this on, and we'll go to the next step. Alright, so you put all the hardware on the handlebars, and now you want to hook up your clutch and your throttle. So here's how you put together your throttle. That pin will go through this cylinder, and the cable, that's the end of the cable you see there right next to that pin. So it goes straight through the spring, and then there's a little piece of metal that holds the pin down underneath the spring. So it goes pinned in this little piece of metal, then the spring, and the cable goes through it all and hooks into this. So that's how that works. Then in here, I don't think you can see it, there's a little nub, and this groove goes on that nub, and the pin goes in the hole, and that's how you put it back together. Figuring this out was a little difficult for me since I did not have instructions. So if you don't have instructions, that's one thing that might slow you down, but there's that. Then the clutch, you know, and these clutches are pretty stiff. Like, I got to really push this to move this clutch, so don't think it doesn't work or anything. But you'll use the big spring as a heat shield. Your cable goes just through this housing, put it in this spring, and then it just goes here. So that's how this end of your clutch is attached, and that end of your throttle is attached. And then that just goes straight in, and this twists on there. I just want to do it carefully, not while I'm holding a camera. But there's your installing your cables and everything, and we'll go on to the next step. Alright, I'm ready to put the carburetor on, and this screw here, you tighten that until you see the tip sticking out just a little bit, maybe a couple millimeters, not quite, and you can see in there the throttle going up. So you want to pull your throttle cable so you can see that in there. Then we're going to slide it on the engine, and you can see there's little grooves, and then where the pipe will hit and seat up against that little ledge down in there. So my point is, you want to shove it all the way on there and not get any vacuum leaks. Alright, so you can see through these grooves here, there's 4 of them. You can see this pipe underneath, and so I know I shoved it all the way on, and I'm going to tighten here. But one thing to know is, like, this is the angle of the carburetor, but this is horizontal, and that's the angle of the carburetor, that's horizontal. It's slightly, the downside is towards the engine. Don't have the downside towards the air filter, or gas will go in your air filter. But there you go. I'm going to tighten this down, and now we're done installing the carburetor. You could smear a little silicone here and there just to seal things up, but I don't know if that's necessary. I'm going to start it first. Alright, installing the chain. Just undo these 3 bolts, and then this cover comes off. Then there'll be the sprocket inside, and just use a screwdriver and you can rotate that sprocket. As the sprocket turns, you feed your chain onto the sprocket. You can push the clutch in to make things easier if you want. Then what you're going to do is, you already popped your master cylinder to get it on, is kind of stretch everything and see where you're going to need to cut your chain. Mark where you need to cut with a file or something so that your mark stays on there. I've already marked this one, and so now we're going to shorten this chain and put that back on. If you're at this stage and you're like, well, how do I get this off now? You can just push your clutch in and then pedal backwards. And see, I'm pulling my chain out of the engine like so. So then you can get your chain back, cut it, and put it back on. So I'll catch up with you then. Alright, installing this CDI unit here. I'm going to use black zip tie. It's going to go in one side. I'm going to go around the bike and through there. And then I'm going to cut it on this side after I use a second zip tie for a nut on there. Up against the back side and on the frame, I'm going to put another little piece of rubber just to hold things in place. So yeah, just zip tie around the frame through here, and then the end of another zip tie to hold that in place, and then trim everything off. So that's that. Alright, I went and drilled this hole out. Before I had just sort of made a divot for this nut, or this little bolt that sticks through to sort of sit in this divot, and I thought that was good enough and it held it on there just fine, but it didn't sit properly. You gotta drill the hole. The reason I didn't drill the hole in the first place when I was using my drill, I was just having a hard time on the rounded surface. But the solution was to just use a little punch like this. Just put your punch, whack it good with a hammer. It actually dents really quite deeply, and then my drill bit was able to sit in that divot, and I was able to make my hole super easily. I should have thought of that before. So yeah, that's how you can make that hole if you're having troubles. And then now it sits down in there, and everything's going to sit flush, and all these three pieces of plastic are all going to sit nice and tightly together. Because before it was binding a little and my throttle wasn't bouncing back. So you got to make the hole. Okay, moving along. Alright, I got to this now, to strap on the muffler, and I heard all legit builds have a strap to keep this from vibrating, which would cause some damage up here, I imagine. What I used and what I did, it was basically a big hose clamp that's used for RV, like toilet waste tubes that are pretty big. And I got it at Walmart, and then I just drilled a couple holes, drilled and bent this. I still have to mount this into the bike, but how I drilled the holes in there, pretty much I just used the punch, made a nice little divot so that then I could drill my hole, and then used some cutters like this just to cut the shape that I wanted. Filed the edges so everything is nice and neat, and then bent things the way I needed. But there you go, that's my bracket from a hose clamp for this aspect of the build. Everything else is coming along. I hooked up this clutch here, and how you hook that up, and I got a new mirror on here. It's kind of cheap. I mean, yeah, sorry I'm putting cheap Chinese things on my bike. Old joke. So this, you need to engage, pull your clutch and push down the pin, this button, to hold the clutch in. Then you come down here, and it's kind of difficult. You clamp some vice grips on the cable, and then you need to push this arm all the way in, and it's pretty tough. That's the hard part. So you push the arm in while you're pulling on the vice grips, pulling the cable through, and I luckily had a second person who was able to just grab that cable right at the hole, keeping it in place, while I could really quick tighten this little nut, or this little screw here, and that holds the cable in place. So there you go. And then I just sort of tied a little knot just to keep things nice and neat. It might hold it in place a little, I doubt it. But then that goes through this spring, and then the other spring's for a heat shield. And so there's your clutch all set, and that's working just fine. Then there's my throttle after everything's been tightened together with that hole I drilled, and now it's releasing just fine. So yes, you got to get that all to fit nice in here and fit properly. But the only thing I have left to do is my wiring and my chain. I have to cut that chain, and so putting on the chain, I got the tightener in nice and tight and exactly where I think I want it after mock fitting everything. But I gotta get the chain on there, get this wiring done, and then we're pretty much ready to go. When you first start these though, you need to break in the engines, and I would recommend using an AMSOIL product. So something like this is maybe $9–10. It's a little expensive, but you don't use much, and especially when you're breaking it in, I imagine it'd be pretty important. You gotta start off with more oil in the gas for like a gallon, and then you add a little less for a gallon, add a little less for a gallon. Do 10-minute intervals, 10-minute rides till you break the engine in. So yes, you got to break the engine in just right. But that's where I am on this. Got to mount that strap on the muffler, the wiring, and the chain. Alright, I hooked up the wiring, and basically what you're looking at, you've got 3 wires that come from the engine. One of them was white, and you snip off the white one and then tape everything up. It's a ground, and you don't want it to ground to the frame, so that's what you're doing there. So then you only have these 2 wires left, blue and a black, and then coming from this CDI box, your ignition here, you have 2 wires, black and blue. Then you have your kill button, and I just sort of twisted the kill button wire around the cable. You don't want to twist cables like this, but this is just the kill button wire, so I went ahead and twisted it so I could route it the way I want. I used the clips, these little attachments, hookups here, whatever you want to call them. I used those still, even though I added wire, because now I can still disconnect this ignition if I need to and replace it without having to undo my wiring, because I soldered all my connections. But I had to add this much wire, and I tried to match the gauge exactly, but I had to add this much wire to get everything where I wanted it. So there you go. Match the gauge, solder your connections. Think about reusing these, because in the future you might want to replace this or upgrade it. So there you go, and I'm going to cover this with some loom, and I'm pretty much done. Alright, after soldering my connections, I taped them with electrical tape and put on some wiring loom, so it's all nice and neat. I had to use 2 sides of the wiring loom here to cover where I had those thicker connectors, but looks pretty clean. I'll show you the other side. So it looks like over here, wire loom going from the engine all the way up to here. Alright. Alright, so there's the basically completed project. And you saw my first bike, and this is more of a deluxe build here. But I mentioned all the prepper reasons or non-statist reasons to get one of these bikes. Properly jetting them, and depending on the fuel you use, you can also make it run really nice and clean, or cleaner anyways. But these are the extra parts I had. This is another way to mount the engine that I didn't use, and just some washers. I think they gave me some extra, so I believe I used everything I needed to. But I'm still thinking about this chain guard. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it, but I have to cut the chain. I tried to use a punch to take out links, but it's pretty heavy duty. I'm going to have to get that cut. And other than that, and breaking it in properly, we're pretty much done. I heard it's good to take the spark plug out and put some oil in there and just pedal it a bit before starting it, so I think I'm going to try that. But at any rate, I've pretty much completed this WD-40 security defense there. But I hope you guys liked seeing my ideas on building one of these. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there with way more experience, and perhaps you could give me some critique or further ideas to build on what I was doing here. But I had fun doing that, and that bike is next. Alright, you guys, have fun.